In today's episode, I am joined by my lovely wife, Camille, as we each share and discuss our top 10 board games to play with your significant other. It's going to be a real fun discussion. My name is Nick Murray, and this is the Bitewing Games Podcast. So, as I mentioned, today I am joined by my own significant other, my wife, Camille. Cami, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Nicholas.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm so glad I found an excuse to get you on here because you've been listening to me record some of these podcasts or shush the household as I record these. So it's nice to have you on the other side of the door this time. Actually, we're out in our kitchen area because the room I usually record in, there's a lawnmower going on across the street, and it's a little quieter out here in the kitchen. Incidentally, we are sharing one microphone right now, and so we're getting real close.
Yeah, real close.
Something I wouldn't do with another guest for sure, but it's kind of fitting for top 10 games with your significant other. Anyways, Cami, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? Maybe who are you and what got you into board gaming?
All right. Yeah, like Nick said, my name's Camille, or people call me Cami. And I don't know, I guess hobbies. I like anything artsy or crafting or, I love being outdoors in nature, kayaking, hiking, that kind of stuff. But as far as board games go, it's thanks to Nick probably mostly that I got into it. I didn't really grow up playing a lot of games, just like your basic, very basic stuff like apples to apples, base 10 type of stuff. So I don't think I played a real board game until I started dating Nick, basically. But
that's okay. You can call those real board games. They're just not games that we particularly love anymore.
Yeah, they had their time. I enjoyed them, in their moment. Yeah,
one of my earliest memories of board gaming with Cami is when we were dating. My cousin, who's my age, his name's Josh, and I went to Camille's apartment, and we played a board game with her and her roommate JC, and this game is called Word on the Street. You've possibly heard of it. It's a solid gateway word game, I would say. And it's a game where there's like a street of letter blocks going down the middle, and you're trying to come up with words very quickly that start with those letters. I think it's been a long time since we played it, totally, and I didn't prepare by going back and looking at this game. But it's kind of a speed game, and you're trying to pull letters into your lanes towards your side, and if you get it off of the road, then you keep the letter. And each team takes turns doing that. So Josh and I were playing against Camille and JC, and when they were taking their turn to try to pull as many letters as they could across, and Josh and I were just being, how were we being?
You're just being rowdy and teasing, and I was really annoyed because JC is the sweetest person on earth, and so I was fighting back, but she was just being really sweet, and so I was just furious with them because we weren't winning. We were not doing very good. But anyways, I was a little too competitive.
Oh man, yeah, we were just trying to get in their heads and distract them while the timer was counting down. And Cami actually gets really competitive in board games and in competitions, and so she just got ticked, and that's probably the most angry one of the times you've ever been that angry at me.
At least the first time you probably ever seen me that angry.
Yeah, that was the first time too. So, and it was just such a funny contrast between the nicest, friend and roommate you have, and then just angry Camille. And Josh thought it was hilarious. And I was just like, oh no, what have I done? I've gone too far. But obviously it worked out. We are now happily married for 5 years now. Mm-hmm. And we've been together a few years before that is when we got together. Anyways, we've been heavy into board gaming for the past several years, probably 4 or 5-ish. Mm-hmm. And we would take King of Tokyo and Takanoko,
Seven Wonders,
stuff like that. Out occasionally to play with, family or friends. But otherwise, we didn't really get into it until dental school. And I've talked about that before, so we won't go into that again. But here we are, having played many, many games since word on the street. And fortunately, they all haven't gone as contentious.
Yeah, there's still a little bit of that once in a while. We'll still get a little competitive, but
yeah, we'll talk a little bit about what we were playing last night, huh? That got a little salty, but that's okay. You were kicking my trash in that game till last night. Anyways, we'll get to that. The topic of this podcast episode, as I've mentioned, is our top 10 games to play with your significant other. So if you don't have a significant other, that is perfectly fine. Basically, top 10 games to play with one other person. You could think of it as that. But if you do have a significant other, hopefully you'll find this very helpful to get, both my opinion and Camille's opinion on these games and why we love them. And yeah, I think we're going to have a good time here.
Yeah.
So, Cami, you just formed your list, finished forming your list today.
Yes.
And you were telling me that you didn't really have any rhyme or reason to the, I guess, or there was reason behind the picks, obviously, but like there's no ranking of them, right?
Yeah, not too much. I kind of ranked them a little bit, but
okay.
I mean, it's hard. A lot of them like really tied. We played a lot of 2-player games over the last several years, so it was kind of hard to narrow it down. But I picked some that like really like I'm like, oh yeah, that's fun. I could play that again tonight. Maybe that's kind of what I meant by.
There we go. Yeah, for me, I was looking at all of our games that I love to play with you, and I just started making a list. Like anything that I saw was like, oh, that's a great one to play with Cami. I threw it down, and I ended up with a list of over 30 games. And I was like, oh man, this is super tricky to narrow down. And I've done recently in my top 50 board games of all time. That was a recent podcast episode, dual episode, and ranked other top 10 games. And so I felt like it would just be kind of lame to pick my, top 2-player significant other games that are my most favorite, because then you'd just be hearing the same stuff over and over. So what I did with those over 30 games was I came up with 10 categories. Kind of like, what kind of mood are you in to play? What kind of game mood are you in to play with your significant other? Or what scenario does it fit best for us? And I split it up that way.
That's a good idea.
So that's what I went with. And let's dive right into it.
All right.
So, Camille, why don't you share your first favorite game to play with your significant other?
All right. So the one that we just got recently is it Ingenious?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that one's been a lot of fun. It's like, you just pick, I don't even know, have these like colors that you pick. It's kind of abstract a little bit, would you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I've had a lot of fun with playing that one with you.
Yeah. So I mentioned this in the last episode. So this is a great, follow up to that. This is Rainer Knizia's very popular, it sold over 1 million copies according to the box cover. Abstract game, which is actually, according to Board Game Geek users, it is best played at 2 players. And I think I'd agree, because it's just a nice back and forth. And abstract games, we have a few really solid ones, like the I don't know how to say that, project games. We have Onitama, we have Santorini. And I do enjoy all of those, but those don't get played very often. And I think part of the reason is that often they are just pure strategy, zero luck, and obviously dry games. And so it's just hard to, I guess, it's hard for those to come to mind very first. And when we're thinking like, what are we in the mood to play tonight? That kind of thing. And it's also hard on the ego when you just get totally trashed in one of those games. Cause again, there's no luck. You can't blame anything but yourself.
Yeah, it makes me feel really dumb when I even though it's like, I'm not dumb. It's just like when I play a game, it's like all strategy. I'm like, and I lose. I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot. But really, when I play, there's that luck. I'm like, okay, well, at least I didn't draw very good cards or whatever. So. Totally.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of benefits to having at least a little bit of luck in games. But anyways, with Ingenious, we got that very recently because we're diving into Reiner's games, and yeah, we've had a blast with it. I guess what do you like about that game, or what's made you enjoy it so much?
I think I just like the puzzly feel of it, and that's just kind of, I have my likes, my preferences of games, and it just kind of fits under that. And I don't know, that's not a very good answer, but
no, yeah, I'd say you tend to gravitate towards games with simpler rules and less of a heavy teach that aren't trying to melt your brain, but are still strategic.
Yeah.
Camille is the dark horse. She always plays down her abilities during the game. She's one of those people that's like, I'm not doing so good, and then suddenly she just comes out and thwomps us and wins the game. And yeah, you've had great success. I think you have a pretty high winning percentage, honestly, whenever you join the table, compared to the average gamer. So she's not one to be underestimated. And Ingenious hits the sweet spot for us because it's simple, it's fast playing, it's thinky, but it's not gonna.
There's not too many rules to keep track of. Yeah.
Yeah, like it says, it's a family game, and so highly recommend that one for any who are interested. It's not too expensive. It's been tried and tested for a long time, and I think it's best at 2 players. I probably, if I ever want to play, I'll probably just stick to 2 players, honestly. I'm happy with that. So
I want to hear your game, Nick.
Good choice. All right, my first one, the category is Best Huge Sprawling Game. So we're jumping from small, quick, ingenious to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And this one I think carries a lot of weight behind it because, like we said, Camille tends to not like the heavy games that I sometimes drag her into. And so I have to be very careful about what I try to get her to play because I don't want her to have a miserable time for 2 to 3 hours. And so this game that I think has been a hit for both of us, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's A Feast for Odin.
Yeah, I like Feast for Odin.
Yeah, and I would recommend to get it with the Norwegians expansion, or you can play the base game a few times, but Norwegians expansion is, once we tried it, I wouldn't go back. It's got pigs in it and the horses, which I don't think the horses are in the base game either, but it's got a lot of other good stuff to help with, depending on what player count you're playing with and balancing things out a little more, but just fleshing out the game more. So Camille, what do you like about A Feast for Odin? And do you remember the first time I introduced this to you and how it was just like this vomit of icons everywhere?
Yeah. Well, kind of. Yeah, I like it because I feel you can kind of pick and choose what you want to work on, and then you can ignore the other things. Because when we first learned it, I feel like I was like, oh, there's so many different things you can do. Yeah. I know that's a lot of games, but I was like, oh my gosh. But then I love polyomino Tetris style games, and so that's a big aspect of the game, and so I really enjoy that part of putting the pieces together, puzzly, and then you just can pick a few different things. I like breeding animals too.
Right.
Yeah,
there's so many cool directions you can go in this game. There's hunting for whales, there's raiding and pillaging, which is what I usually do. I just can't resist. Like you said, there's breeding animals. When you're laying these small polyomino tiles out onto your board, you're also building up an engine. You're trying to surround other icons, and if you completely surround them with polyominoes without covering them, then for the rest of the game, each round you earn whatever icon that you just surrounded. You're also trying to build up an income, and you have to cover the lower left segment of your board before you can cover the next income token. So there's just tons going on here. I think the other thing that probably made it appeal to you is that it's not a super confrontational game, which sometimes you're not a huge fan of. Going back to Word on the Street, where it was very antagonistic. At least the way we played it, it's not that it's not meant to be. But anyways, this isn't like a war game, although there's Vikings and stuff. It's a pretty chill game, honestly, for how sprawling and huge it is.
Would you say there's much interaction at all, or is it pretty much like you're playing your own board?
It's very much like that. It's a worker placement game, and I think if you play with more people, there's a little bit more getting in each other's way as far as which actions you want.
Because only one person can take each action. action.
Yeah, I've had people going hard on the whale hunting strategy, and then, I get a little whale boat, a single one, and then I take up their valuable whale hunting spot just because I'm just evil.
Yeah.
And so there is a little bit of that, but it's very much a mild game. I think the thing to keep in mind when you go and look up a picture of this, it's just like, nope. Like, that's when I first saw this game, I wasn't too deep into the heavy gaming waters, and I was just like, holy smokes, this is too much. But then I watched a video playthrough and kind of explanation of how it's organized, and then I realized, oh, this is actually super well organized for having over 60 worker placement spots. And that's the way I tried to teach it to Camille, and I think that helped a lot too. Basically, you got to teach people that this is organized by rows and columns. And if you pick a particular row, that's a type of action. And if you pick whatever column spot you pick of that row, that's how good the action and how expensive that type of action is going to be. And when you think of it that way, it comes together really nicely. And I think after one play of it, now this is like it's probably a 3-hour game your first few times. You got to play through it one time to really get a feel for how things are, but it's so fun to break out. And it's one of those, like, when we have a lot of energy and a lot of time, we put the kids to bed early or whatever, and we're feeling ambitious, this is the one that we go to just take up our entire table and just have a really enjoyable time.
Yeah. I definitely have to be in the mood, though. I will say that.
Yeah. You don't, it would be exhausting to break out on the wrong night, so anyways, what's your next one?
So I was also kind of thinking about games in different kind of categories. I didn't really list them in categories, but I was thinking about, like, some nights I just don't want to use my brain. And one game that I really like that's more of just dexterity is Crokinole.
Nice.
And that one, I know it's a fancy game, but I enjoy playing that one with you.
Absolutely. That is actually one of my picks as well for the most prized possession, probably because it was the most expensive, and I had to ask you for it for Christmas a couple Christmases back as my only Christmas present, and it was totally worth it. I think we've played this dozens upon dozens of times, and it just hits the spot with everybody I show it to, and whenever I think about it, I'm like, man, I don't play enough Crokinole, but we've already gotten our money's worth out of it, and it's going to last us a good long time. What do you like about Crokinole?
Like I said, it's like just a different, I feel like, type of category. And I like, I guess, the sportiness of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it feels cool when you do a really cool shot, like you flick your finger and it bounces off something and goes in, or like hits yours out but still goes in the hole, and you're like, oh yeah,
your face gets so smug in those moments. It's just so satisfying to hit a shot like that. But then it's really a funny game because the very next shot that you take can just be, and I'm saying this, anybody takes after, they have the highlight of the night, ESPN highlight shot. Yeah. The very next shot they take can just be a total whiff and just the most awful thing. And it's hilarious because it's such a fast playing game that, you're flicking discs and you quickly forget, whatever horrible shot you took and remember the really good ones. And it's a great time.
Yeah, it's a solid game.
Yeah, that's one that you play at 2 or 4 players. And I was going to throw on, I know sometimes the barrier to entry is finances, and this one is certainly the $200 plus range. So I'd say another one as far as the most prized possession category for me that I threw as secondary is Clask. Mm-hmm. Our most recent play of this, our power went out, and we were bummed because we were in the middle of cooking dinner, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so depressing when suddenly you realize you're not going to eat your dinner that you were preparing your appetite for. Because the power just wouldn't come back on. And so I had to go out to Wendy's and bring that back because it was close by for the family. And then we put the kids to bed and had nothing to do because the power was out and it was pitch black everywhere. So we had a couple small electric candle things, and we stuck those in the Wendy's bags on either side of our table, and we set up Clask.
Yeah, they made great luminaries, and it was just like a romantic candlelight Clask.
Yeah, it was exotic. I've talked about Clask before. It's like miniature air hockey, but it has 3 different objectives that you can kind of win each round in, and one of them is kind of the classic air hockey, get it in the hole. But it's like a little marble you're hitting around with these magnetic sticks. This is only a $40 game. That's why I say this is a good secondary option. It's a dexterity, quick playing game. The other two ways that you can win a point are by the other person clasking, where they accidentally move their player pawn into the hole where you're trying to aim the ball. And it's kind of like crokinole, where you feel like an idiot when it happens, but it's hilarious. And then the other one is there's these tiny little magnetic biscuits, and you're trying to knock those onto the other player's half, and then they have to avoid those, because if your pawn gets too close, the biscuits stick to it, and if 2 biscuits stick to your pawn, then you lose that point, and you play to like 6 points, I believe. And so Clask is awesome, and I just love those moments when I can make you feel trapped because I've got multiple biscuits on your side, and I'm just railing the ball at your hole, and you're just trying to survive, and then suddenly I Clask myself. Those are probably my favorite moments, when it's just like I had it set up perfectly, and then I just, like an idiot, Clask myself. So
Yeah.
anyways,
Good memories.
yeah, great times. My next game is a big cooperative game. Oh, I said big, and then I put a small one on here. So we'll just say a cooperative game. And that is The Mind.
Yeah.
Was that one of your choices?
It wasn't. It was on my contenders, I think.
Ooh,
I was thinking
okay.
about cooperative games because, sometimes I'm just not in the mood to be in a competition, and I think it'll just break my mental health. So cooperative game always is really nice, because it's like, okay, we're on a team.
Yeah, you get to collaborate and work together. And I think The Mind has consistently been the most played and enjoyed for us. And I'm not huge on cooperative games. I don't own a million of them. I do own and enjoy some of our favorite ones that we've kept. And The Mind is great because it's just like you're playing by gut feeling. You're staring each other in the eye, wondering like, are you going to play next, or am I going to play next? Is my card the next one to play? And it's so tense, and I don't know, it's just really simple and enjoyable. It's another one of those you can turn your brain off and just play by the gut.
Yeah, that one's a fun one. I like that one a lot.
So my other secondary cooperative game that we've only played twice, but I think we've enjoyed it both times, and even though it's kicked our trash, that is Pandemic Iberia.
That was on not my list, but my almost list.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, we played a lot of Pandemic. We tried to get through all of Legacy, but we kind of just got exhausted by it. But Pandemic Iberia is cool because it adds, I think most people listening are familiar with Pandemic, but Iberia adds in 2 elements that are very interesting, an extra layer of strategy, and I think it's the hardest Pandemic we've played as well, because usually we do just fine in those types of games, but this one we haven't even won yet. And one of them is that you, instead of taking flights or going from one research center to another, like teleporting kind of thing with your pawn, you can actually build up a railroad network over time using your actions, and then that's how you zoom around the board in one move, is by using your rail network. And so it's an interesting dynamic where it's like, do we invest time early in building up our rail network and letting some of the other diseases spread so that we can quickly get to them later? The other thing is there's purification of water. You place these tokens in between, in these sections that are divided by the routes and the cities. And when disease cubes come to any cities surrounding that section where you've put a purification token, then the token comes off and the cube does not go on. And so you can kind of buffer those areas against future spreading of the disease. And so those 2 little wrinkles make, I don't know, that's the most enjoyable version of Pandemic we've played, and we played, a decent amount.
Yeah.
So what's your next one?
All right, let's see. I have Patchwork, who's by the same designer as Feast for Odin.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's probably just a more, I feel like, I like those polyomino, like I said, games.
So good.
The thing that depresses me about Patchwork, though, is your score can be like really low, right? Really, or it can go negative almost.
Yeah. I mean, A Feast for Odin's similar, but it's definitely easier. It's surprisingly easier to overcome those negative points in A Feast for Odin.
Yeah, but I like that one. It probably goes along with Feast for Odin. Like it's just a simpler version. I mean, just like one piece of it, I guess. But
yeah, interestingly, I've read that when Uwe was designing A Feast for Odin, he kind of designed these spin-off games using some of those core concepts and fleshing those out in simpler versions, and that's where Patchwork was born. At least that's how I understood it. But it's a great polyomino game. It's one that I did a fun enjoyable blog post on last year about Battle of the Polyominoes on our website at Bitewing Games. And I pitted Patchwork against a few others. And it's, when I was ranking it in all the categories, it was pretty strong across the board, a very good game. It's one that I regard very highly as a fantastic but accessible 2-player game.
Yeah. It was one of our first 2-player games too, so we've had it for a while.
Yeah. Very nice. All right. So speaking of polyomino games, I don't know why Destiny had us scrunching these all at the beginning, but I promise there's a little more diversity to this list. But maybe that's just a good thing for significant others to be enjoying together some good old polyominoing. This one is my most addictive game to play with your significant other, and that is My City.
Yeah, that one's on my list.
Yes.
Probably can tell what I like already.
Yeah. So you told me this was, of all the new games, new releases that you played last year, this was your favorite, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's like simple, but I like how I'm not a big fan of like the legacy type style games where you just like keep playing it and it just gets a little different each time. But this one, maybe it's just because it's simple and short sessions and it has the polyominoes. But I'm a big fan. Yeah, I had a lot of fun playing it.
Reiner and Uwe, I think, are probably the main designers that are just so consistently good at designing 2-player games. This is another Knizia game. And what we love about My City, it's one that I just kind of just randomly picked up at a board game store because I was passing by it and I just couldn't resist. It was there in front of me. And I had seen I think Tom Vassel's review and Eric Martin's review on Board Game Geek. And seen a couple of video reviews and they were all kind of like, yeah, it's a good game. It's fine. But none of them were overly enthusiastic about it. And that's why I just kind of stumbled across them. I was like, I like Knizia games. I haven't found one that I don't like yet. Let's try it out. And it just blew us away. Just from the very first play of it, I was like, Reiner, you dog. Because, I was skeptical it being non-player interactive, at least for the initial scenarios. And it doesn't get that much more interactive later, but it does a little bit. But what stood out to me was just how he took the simple bingo mechanism of flip a card and everybody places that tile out and made it so interesting and crunchy and just a few simple rules, how he can just masterfully turn it into this very interesting and dynamic game. And then how one little tweaks to the rules, each scenario changes it so drastically. And I think the reason this has been such a huge hit for us, is that, like you said, it's so easy to break out. And I put it in the most addictive category because there have been nights where I'm like, we should play a game. And then I just can't get off the couch because I'm so tired from the day's activities or, just the thought of setting up and getting into it and sitting at these hard wooden chairs at our table. I just can't get myself to do it. But My City got us to do it so many times. It was like, we can just do one little 20-minute game and then we play that. And of course we're thinking so hard about it and trying to do our best. It goes 30 minutes and then one is not enough. So we play a second. Yeah. So it was so fun to play through. I really hope Reiner makes another, spinoff or sequel or spiritual sibling to this because it was a blast to play. And I agree that it's probably one of the best games on this entire list to play with your significant other, at least from our experience.
I agree. Amen.
All right, what you got next?
So the next one I put is Onitama, actually.
Nice.
And we haven't played that for quite a while.
Yeah, it's been
I'd
a
like
while
to break it out again soon.
That's a good one.
But I think it's cool. It's the one, you break out cards, right? And it kind of puts the position of...
Yeah, I believe there's 5 or 6 cards total. And these cards each have a specific movement that you can do with your pawns. And you can kind of think of it like a smaller version of a chessboard. You have maybe 5-ish pawns that are all the same in function. And you have 2 objectives. You're trying to either... you're trying to knock out the other person's pawns, I think.
I think so.
Or you're trying to get one of your pawns to the other end of the player's board. And it's so simple because you pick from two different options in front of you. You just have two cards in front of you, and whichever one you use, you're going to pass over to the other player, and they're going to acquire that into their options in a future turn.
Yeah. So I like it because it is like kind of strategy, like abstract strategy type, but also like, yeah, you only have so many options that you can do. And then you got to pick and choose. And if I have to do something, I'm like, oh, I'm giving this to him. I can't do it again. And he's going to be able to do it. I don't know. It's simpler a little bit, but it's still fun.
Right. Totally. It's definitely one that I prefer to like chess or checkers. I don't know why. I mean, we watched the Queen's Gambit, and that made chess look pretty ballin'. That was fun show to watch. But yeah, I agree. Onitama is just so quick and snappy and clever in how it works. And you're kind of deciding, like, do I take advantage of this move now, but then give it to her, and now she's going to have, oh my gosh, she can't have this card yet because then she can do this to me. And it's an interesting back and forth. Mm-hmm. Good choice. All right. My next one is the most polarizing game to play with your significant other. This is one that I freaking love to play. And every time, I mean, I still am able to convince you to play it quite a few times, but every time we break it out, you're just like, I hate this game. And that's Blitzkrieg.
No. I knew you were going to put this one on your list. And I'm like, and I was like, I know he's going to put this one on his list. And like, I was trying to think about like why I don't like it. And it's just like, I don't know. It's like not a bad game. It's just like not interesting to me. I don't know. It's just kind of like, okay, whatever. I just don't enjoy it.
That hurts.
But
that hurts so
I know
bad.
You love it so much. So sometimes you got to play games that your significant other likes to play and you don't really care about, I guess.
It's a 20-minute roughly game, so it's not too bad. Yeah, and you've played Dogs of War as well. Both of these are designed by Paolo Mori, and they have a similar concept. But Blitzkrieg is kind of like the two-player version, war-themed, tug-of-war style game where you have tiles behind your shield, usually 3, and you choose one of those to place out onto any open theater of war. And I thought that this would be too much of a war game when I first saw the look of it and the theming and stuff, but it's actually a very clever tug of war tile placement, almost worker placement style game, back and forth thing. And I just love everything about this game. So it just doesn't appeal to you, huh?
Yeah, I can't put my finger on it. It's not a bad game. Like I think about it, I'm like, it's not a bad game. It's just like I don't enjoy playing it. But
oh man. To me, it's so interesting because there are multiple tug of war regions that you're competing over. And so you're thinking, okay, I need to win this one because it's worth so many points, but it takes so long to do that. I'm going to have to commit multiple tiles to it. But also there are bonuses that you get on wherever you place your tiles on specific spaces. And so then you have to take into account, okay, this would be a really nice bonus for me to have, such as bombing the other player, where you cause them to lose an entire tile from their hand, and so they go from 3 to 2, and so suddenly they only have 2 options each turn, and you can actually win the game by bombing them enough that they have no more tiles, or that they only have 1 tile and nowhere that they can place it legally. So there's some interesting dynamics there, but there are also other bonuses that let you add another tile to your total hand, or earn really powerful special tiles into your bag that you hope to draw out, and or move the tug of war markers even further along the track that you're playing into. There's just so many interesting incentives and carrots dangling everywhere, and I love the tension that it offers.
Yeah, I think part of my issue with it is just my personality. I tend to not enjoy games as much that are like you like hurt another person, I guess. Yeah. Take that. Maybe I just like more like games where I play by myself, which is I don't know if that even makes sense, but and so I feel like I guess frustrated when like, okay, I'm gonna go up this track, and then you come in and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go up that track 5 the other way. I'm like, oh, you just like
shut it down.
Everything I did and made yours like almost impossible for me to even get that back. And anyways, I just get so frustrated.
Yeah, that can be a frustrating feeling when you feel invested in something and then it just crumbles in front of you. And that to me is interesting and what really, I guess stimulates my enjoyment of a game. But yeah, everybody has their own tastes, and so that's definitely one that I think if you and your significant other like that kind of game, I would highest recommendations from me. But I think Camille offers a good. It's
a solid game. It's just yeah, not mine favorite.
Fair enough. All right. What's your next one?
Look. Oh, my next one is Jaipur.
Nice.
Jaipur, yeah. Oh, what do I like about Jaipur?
Do you want me to give a summary here? Refresh your memory. Yeah, that's actually a great summary of Jaipur, because I think the first time we played it, we were like, it's fine. It's a game. I don't know. It's just like the generic mercantile Middle Eastern camels in the desert theming, and there's nothing like that's like catches your eye and it's like, oh, this is spectacular initially. But what we found playing it more times after our first play is that it's just so solid on all accounts, and the more you play it, the more, I guess, tense that it feels, because it's a game where you're simply drafting cards from the center into your hand to try to play as a set to score big points and claim point tokens. And so there's an interesting back and forth of like, you know, your hand can only be so big, and eventually you're going to have to commit to playing some cards. But you're kind of waiting for the right thing to come out. But when you take cards from the center and draft those, then new ones show up for your opponents to have first dibs on, and it just hurts so bad when you take like some crummy cards, and then the next ones that come out are just the best, like gold, like, oh my gosh. And so you're both kind of playing like chicken, in the sense that you're just waiting for the other person to take a bunch of cards from the center to set up the other player, and eventually you just have to commit. But then there's this incentive to commit early and play your cards early, because the whatever set you play, you'll scrape off tokens off the top of that set's stack, and the higher tokens, the first tokens, are worth more points. So again, you have this like really interesting balance between playing to get those higher points, or waiting to get better cards to play.
Yeah. It's just like a good, simple cardish game.
Yeah, I love Jaipur. The more I play it, the more I love it, and I think it's an essential card game in any couple's collection.
Yeah, I agree.
Very cheap too, so
All right.
You have no reason not to.
What's yours, Nick?
All right. My next one, we're going to go opposite of Polarizing Game. Best non-confrontational game. And there could have been a few that would be put on this list. We have a good amount of those because that's tends to be what Camille prefers. But I chose Super Skill Pinball for Cade. There's actually another one coming out I'm pretty excited for. But this is a roll and write, which if you listen to another recent podcast episode, I got rid of a bunch of our roll and writes that we've really, really enjoyed. I again would remind people that these are not bad games, and I just kind of grew tired of them.
I love roll and write, so I was a little depressed when he got rid of a bunch of them. Especially I love Railroad Inc. and Welcome to was fun, and you know it's sad, but.
But you were over it pretty quickly, right?
I mean, we have so many games.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
she was okay
like whatever
with it in the end. Again, we have like I said, over 30 games just in our collection that I wanted to include in this podcast, and so ultimately they kind of got pushed out just by being played out and lacking, I guess, for me, the longevity that my favorite games have, because they don't have that player interaction and because there's not that evolving meta that can happen. It's just kind of your head down doing your own thing. But Super Skill Pinball, so cool because it's very thematic. It feels like I grew up with some old broken down pinball machines actually in our house. At some point, I think in the 90s, my dad just bought 3 pinball machines, and we just had those oftentimes collecting dust. But in our basement, these old school ones, some of them, were busted, have been busted most of the time I was growing up, which is sad because I always wanted to play them. But we did have some working ones, and we acquired a 4th one from my aunt and uncle, who I think one of my cousins smashed the back screen. And so there was no more glass, the back glass, but it still worked just fine. And we acquired that one from them for free because they were just going to toss it. And so I grew up playing lots of pinball, and this game feels like pinball to me. And so I really appreciate from a design perspective how thematic it is.
Yeah. And there's 4 different boards? Or
Yeah, there are 4 different like pinball tables or boards in the game, so there's tons of variety.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety, and so each game is like different. Like you have different strategy, and yeah, they're all really fun.
Yeah, it's pretty simple overall. I would say it's not the lightest roll and write, but it's very easy to get people into it pretty quickly. And the other thing that's nice about coming back to boards that you've already played is there's a high score chart on the back. And usually I don't care about that in video games or board games, but in pinball, for some reason we had a high score competition between my siblings and I in our old pinball machines, and this one does entice us to come back and try to beat that high score. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of fun in that sense, and that's my pick for best non-confrontational game.
Good choice. All right, my next one is Undaunted. We finished the Normandy one. We're working on North Africa.
Yeah. And this is one of mine too, so another crossover, and this is my pick for endlessly entertaining, and I'll explain why in a minute, but go ahead with tell us more about Undaunted.
So Undaunted is a game where, each time you play, it's like set up differently, and you have all these cards. It's like a drafting. Is it drafting or?
It's
deck building.
Deck
building. And you build up your deck, and you have like these different people. Like you have the scout that goes out and makes it so you can move more spaces, and then there's the rifleman that will shoot the other opponents.
And help you control tiles. That's usually part of the objective, to control a space. So you got to send out, but they're kind of a weaker, attacking thing, but they also are essential. Yeah.
And anyways, you play out your cards, and basically there's a different objective each game you play. And each of us, sometimes we have like different cards too in our deck, depending on like what, we're like one team. I don't know.
You're talking about the objectives? Yeah, like sometimes it's like this team is trying to make it all the way across the map and just control one space, and the other army is just trying to hold them back or to take out a specific unit, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I was saying different cards too. Like sometimes like I have
different deck.
I have like a sniper and you don't, or something.
Yeah, the second game in the series, Undaunted North Africa, is even more asymmetric. The entire decks for those have different cards that you just never touch if you play a certain faction exclusively. And so it's very interesting how they kind of amped that up. And so you have to deal with kind of your specialty and make the most of it against their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. So basically, I think what I like about the game is just like there's different challenges each time. And
yeah, there's 12 scenarios, I think, in both. I know there's 12 in the first one, and so we played that at least 13 or 14 times together. We played a couple scenarios multiple times, and now we're on North Africa, and we break it out. Probably every few weeks we get into the next scenario, and now they've announced an expansion to both of those games where you can add in a third and fourth player, or maybe just 4 players, and more scenarios. And I think they've announced another game in the series as well. So that's why it's my endlessly entertaining pick, because it's probably one of our favorite deck builders because of the tense decisions you have to make between, do I get initiative so I can go first this round and try to take out the cards in your hand so you have a weaker turn, or do I keep my more powerful cards in my hand so I have a better turn and hope they survive until my turn. Mm-hmm. And so that's a good pick from both of us, Undaunted. And I would say when we first got into it, that first rules read and teach, I remember being a little bit frustrated with like reading through the rules and being like, man, I think it was like how simple there wasn't much explanation on the cards. We kind of had to keep referring to the sheet of the rule book that kind of summarizes all the actions. But then in the second play and beyond that, I came to appreciate how streamlined and simple the cards were. And so I feel like once you get up and running, you play it once or twice, it's when you can easily get into and it's a very focused and pretty streamlined, really well-designed game. All right. My next pick is the best analysis paralysis inducing game. And I was really on the fence between these two, so maybe I'll just cram them both in there and cheat. This top 10 number I'm not very good at adhering to. But they are Curious Cargo and Schotten Totten 2.
have Battle Line. Is that like the same as Shot and Totten, or is that different?
Yeah, so Battle Line and Shot and Totten 2 are very similar games from Reiner Knizia. They share the same core concepts of you're playing these basically sets of poker cards onto different areas, and it's kind of a tug of war-ish game. There's different battles that you're having across the table, and you're trying to win multiple of those battles to win the game. And so if you play one card each, take turns doing that. And if I play a run of 3 cards of the same suit, then that is a very, very strong, battalion against whatever you play, which could just be a sum of any cards, and that's a lower rank. So whoever plays the highest ranked set of cards, and if we play the same type of set, whether it's like just all of the same color or whatever, then you sum it up, and whoever has the higher sum wins. So it's an interesting but very simple, streamlined back and forth thing. The difference between Shot and Totten 2 and Battle Line is that Shot and Totten is more asymmetric, and in Battle Line, you're both trying to win against each other. In Shot and Totten, one person is the defender and the other person is the attacker. And so the defender is trying to defend their wall from breaking down and being run over. And so you don't really have to win anything. You just have to keep the other player from losing stuff. And you have some special tokens you can use. Same thing on the other side where the offender has some special actions and tokens they can take. So both great picks. Why do you like Battle Line or Shot and Totten?
Well, I probably like Battle Line more just because, I don't know. Maybe I just don't like the asymmetrical. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like we always like tie it up and then I lose or whatever.
That's true. We've had a few times where it's tied, and there's some interesting tiebreakers there. But yeah, you don't like losing in a tiebreaker, huh? That's probably when you get. I think anybody would. I know. I tend to appreciate ties because it's like, wow, that was competitive and close, and then there was a tiebreaker and somebody won, and I don't feel too bad. But you're kind of on the other end where it's like, are you kidding me? Like, I was that close to winning.
Yeah, but I think I like the game because of, like, I guess, like, the risk. I like the risk of not knowing, okay, does Nick have this card that could potentially make it so I don't win this trick, or should I go forward?
Yeah, it's about committing to a spot, and whoever commits first is basically revealing their hand. It's like, this is the best I can do in this area. And so now the other person has that information, and they know, okay, I just have to do better than that to win that section, and then I'm good to go. So usually for both of us, neither of us want to fully reveal our plays or our intentions for a section, and so we spread out wide, and this game probably goes way longer than it should because we're both like non-committal and we're playing close to the chest kind of thing. It seems like from my observations, we are slower if we play Shot and Totten 2. There's a little bit more room for like analysis paralysis. That's why I chose that one.
Yeah.
But it's still enjoyable nonetheless. And
what was your other analysis paralysis one?
Curious Cargo.
Oh, okay.
And so this is another tile-laying game and puzzly one, which I think is why it kind of appeals to you. And it's a new one from last year as well from Ryan Courtney. If you're familiar with Pipeline, it shares a similar pipey, tiley components and puzzle. But this one is even more brain melting. It's very focused in on the spatial puzzle. And this one I've observed it's kind of polarizing with people in general. I've shown a couple other friends Curious Cargo, and they don't like spatial puzzles, and this is just like spatial puzzles cranked up to 10. And so they're like, yeah, it's a good game, but it's not for me. And other people get really frustrated by how I think adaptive and tactical you have to be in this game, because you may be drawing tiles out of a bag when you take that as an action, and you're hoping you get what you want to make it very convenient to make your connections to the edges of the board, but usually that doesn't happen. So you have to wind your way around, or you have to exchange certain tokens for other cards and kind of find workarounds to the problems that luck of the draw presents. And so there are lots of ways to get around that bad luck, and that's what makes it interesting to me. Any thoughts about Curious Cargo?
I agree about that analysis paralysis, what you say. I feel like Nick is always waiting for me for my turn because I am just like trying to figure out the best possible place to put this tile, but it's good. It takes me forever to play, so.
Yeah, you love to maximize your turns and think through all the possibilities, and so yeah, it's definitely one that you need the time for. At least with Camille and I, it's one that I think could be played very quickly with people who are just like not as concerned about optimizing every action, but more just like, you know, playing by gut feeling, just going with like, this feels good, let's try that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What do you got next?
Oh, my next one is a classic. Probably our first 2-player game that we really got into was Seven Wonders Duel.
Nice. I thought you'd pick this.
Yes. I don't know. It's probably one of the first 2-player games that we really started playing together.
Definitely.
Back like when we were first married.
Mm-hmm.
And we really liked playing Seven Wonders with our friends, and so we decided to try out Seven Wonders Duel. And just like the draft. Do you do drafting in that one as well?
Yep. So it has a pyramid of cards that come out for each of the 3 ages, and the pyramid is shaped differently, and you can only draft from the uncovered cards at the bottom of it, and it kind of changes the number of options you have. And half of them are face down until the cards on top of them come off, and then they're revealed. And so it's like, if I take that card, I may be setting you up for something really nice. So I don't want to take it. But anyways, keep going.
Anyways, it's just really fun. It can be... And just like normal Seven Wonders, there's like multiple ways you can win. You can win by military. Can you win multiple times?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, military and science, or just by points at the end.
Yeah. And yeah, I just find it to be very fun.
I agree. The multiple victory possibilities are a very cool aspect of this game, because if I march the military token down the track, now usually this is Camille, actually, believe it or not, being the non-confrontational person that she is, she's always going after those military cards and just like putting me on my heels up against the ropes, just trying to survive, keep that token away from the instant victory that would just end the game prematurely in her favor.
Yeah, makes it interesting because it makes you have to go for military, or else I'm gonna win, you know.
Yeah, and it's a very straightforward, clear way to show like how are you doing in one of these 3 objectives. Whereas I tend to go for the science more, because it's kind of a more tricky one where you have to get, you know, a bunch of different science type cards, and you can just instantly win if you get the 6th one of a different type. But yeah, this is a game that for the longest time you were just kicking my trash in, huh? Yeah,
maybe that's why I like it so much. I love when I get to win Nick. And I feel like for a long time, especially when we were first married, like I said, I didn't play a lot of board games or card games growing up. So I feel like Nick would always win. But this is when we started playing this game, I felt like, oh yeah, I'm like winning this one more than Nick is. Like this is pretty good. I like this game.
It killed me. Yeah, every time, because I would feel like I was playing it well, and then it was just like, of course we tally up the scores at the end, and it's Camille's the winner, and yeah, that drove me nuts. But I loved playing it with you too, even though you always beat me.
Yeah, so I think that's a good one just for anyone's collection. I think any couple or any 2 friends would enjoy it.
Totally. Good choice. There are also some cool expansions. We have the first one, Pantheon, which adds even more depth if you grow tired of the base game. But there's a lot there to play in the base game, so I would say you could start with that and have plenty to enjoy. All right, next one I have is, I will be shocked if this isn't on your list. This is my old reliable category, and Jaipur was actually the notable honorable mention on this one, but the first one I picked was Azul.
That's actually not on my list.
What? Are you kidding me? This was Camille's like favorite game for over a year.
Yeah.
And it's great at 2 players. It's great at all player counts.
Because I still love that game. I just wasn't thinking about it in a 2-player. I was like, well, we could play that one with 4 players, probably more than we played at 2 players.
I don't know. I feel like when we had like Sagrada and Azul, when we first got those games, we were just hitting those up all the time. And Railroad Inc., it was just like those 3 were the trifecta for a good while. And Azul has been the one that's remained my favorite among those 3, because there's a little more interaction, a little more cutthroat drafting to it. And I've done another blog post about which Azul is best, and I feel like the original is best because it allows for the most player interaction, where you can predict and try to get into your opponent's heads and figure out what are they going to draft, and then plan your drafting around what they're going to draft, either by stealing what they want or by leaving out there what is really important to you, but what you feel they're not going to take. And so to me, I feel so clever when I'm able to kind of somewhat read people's minds and then plan multiple turns around that. And then when it does work out, I just feel like a genius.
Yeah, I always like Azul, and I don't like mean games, but recently I felt like Azul's been kind of mean, and so maybe that's why I've kind of backed off of it.
It can be mean, and the original Azul is the meanest of the bunch. I'd say Summer Pavilion, it would be, if you want to, like a completely non-mean game, that one's a lot less punishing in the drafting phase. But yeah, Azul is one of the top games I would recommend to anyone who's just like, wandering around Walmart or Target or whatever and wanting something outside of their collection of Monopoly and Catan. Azul would probably be one of the first games I recommend to them, and it's one that I would still love, happily play at 2 players with you.
Yeah, I can see Azul being one of my favorite games, like, forever.
Yeah, it's just classic abstract game with a beautiful production and just hits the spot. So. Do you have one more?
I have one more. Do you have
Sweet.
one more as well?
Yeah, we've had some overlaps and stuff, but it seems like we're still good on track.
The last one on my list is Lost Cities.
Yes. I was hoping we'd get this on here because there are a lot of games like Lost Cities that didn't make my 10 games that I picked for this, plus a few extra cheats. And so I was really hurt about that. So thank you for picking that.
Yes, I like this one a lot. Sorry, I always have to gather my thoughts on a game.
Yeah, so Lost Cities is somewhat similar to Reiner Knizia's Battle Line and Schottentotten, where you have a hand of cards that you don't want to commit out onto the table and onto the board yet, and you're just kind of playing chicken with each other. But this one, you're going on expeditions. There are 5 different colors or expeditions that you can commit to over the course of the game, and these cards go from 1 to 10, and when you play a card into a specific expedition, you can no longer play any cards lower than that card on your side. But sometimes you have the 6 and the 7 in your hand, but you don't have anything lower than that, and so eventually you're holding out for it, but eventually you're like, do I just commit anyways? And when you commit to an expedition, you immediately are going to lose 20 points at the end of the game. Those are the expenses, the investment for going on that expedition. So now you have to make up that loss and try to get into a profitable point territory by playing more than 20 points total with these cards of like 1, 2, 3, you add them together at the end. So it's a back and forth of, Cami has committed to the yellow expedition. I have some really good yellow cards in my hand. I don't want to get rid of those. I don't want to commit to that because she probably has too many good ones, but I don't want to get rid of them from my hand because the discard piles you can draw from on your turn.
Yeah, so Nick just likes to hoard things, and somehow he always hoards things, but still is able to get what he wants down. So I don't know how he does that.
I'm totally a hoarder in those types of games. Arboretum, yeah. Lost Cities. I love to hoard things from people that I know they would just, their eyes would light up and they would love to get that from me. Yeah,
but it's so fun. I like that one. And I love, there's also like cards you can put down at the beginning to like double your score, so it's like kind of a risk too, because you're like, okay, am I gonna get to 20 points? If I do, I can double that.
Yeah.
If not, then I'm getting double negative points. So sometimes you can get like a negative score in that game.
The wager cards are so cool. They're these handshake cards. There's 3 of them, I think, in each color, but you have to play them first before you commit anything else to it. And so it's such an interesting decision of like, do I commit super early to trying to double my score? Because if you end up with negative points, you don't break the 20 in that section, then you're going to double or triple or quadruple, depending on how many wager cards you played, your points in that section. And so classic Reiner making so much out of so little.
Was that a Reiner Knizia game?
It is a Knizia game, yes.
I didn't realize that.
Speaking of which, that is my last one. Again, Uwe Rosenberg and Reiner Knizia, they have so many good 2-player games. And this last one, is my category is favorite new game to play with my significant other. And shameless plug, this is a game that we are going to publish. It is called Puma Fiosi. So in Puma Fiosi, it is an interesting twist on trick taking and push your luck, because there's just a deck of cards from 1 to 55, and these are the Puma Fiosi cards, okay? And you are trying, there's this hierarchy laid out on the table. The very top card is worth 10 points. It's the big boss card. And the very bottom card is -3 points. That's the graveyard. And in this game, you are trying to basically climb up the ranks and end up at the top of this hierarchy of the Puma Mafia. But the interesting thing is if you stick your neck out too far or take too much attention thematically in the game, then you can end up killed or arrested, killed by a rival mobster family, one of your opponents. That's the theme here, but the way it ties into the game is in trick taking is that there's only one suit of cards, but whoever plays the second highest card of each trick or each round wins that round. Then they take that winning card and choose where they want to put it on the hierarchy. And there's only a spot for one card in each step of the hierarchy. So I can win this trick or round with something low. Again, it's 1 to 55. So if I win with like a 20, that's on a little lower side. But I can put it anywhere I want that there's an empty space. I could commit it to the 10 at the top with my measly card and hope that it stays there. But the tricky part is that you can also bump down other people's cards that are already out on the hierarchy if the one that you won with is higher than the one that they had placed there previously. And so I can bump down your card that's a 32 if I have anything higher than a 32 that I won a later round with. And so not only are you knocking people down these steps and they're losing end game points because they go from a 10 to an 8 to a 7, and it skips a couple numbers occasionally. And but also each time one of your cards, which has your tile on it to designate it's yours, gets knocked down, you take a penalty point. So it's like a double whammy of press your luck, where you're thinking to yourself, okay, I can try to go high and hope it stays there, but if somebody knocks me down, I'm going to start taking penalty points. And if the next spot I get knocked down to is also occupied by a higher value card, then I'm going to just keep cascading down, tumbling down this hierarchy and taking a penalty point for each step I fall.
Yeah, and this game, I think it goes up to 5 players, right?
Yeah, it goes 2 to 5.
Yeah, but I found it, I enjoy it most playing it at 2-player.
Same.
And so that's why we think it's a great game for your significant other. And when you play 2-player, there's like a dummy player.
It's called Luigi.
Luigi, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so...
Well, the interesting thing about this is when Reiner first pitched this game to us, it did not have this variant or Luigi in the game. It was just the same rules as the rest of it. And I tried it with you, and I tried it with a friend, and I thought it was kind of interesting, but it was also very like brutal. And
I hated it.
It was like zero sum. It's just like, all right, I'm either going to give you the win or I'm going to take the win by playing a lower, the second highest card. But often if you were taking the win for yourself, it was with like a less than ideal card. And so it just felt like you were like getting nailed left and right. But what's interesting is Reiner came back a little bit later. And I didn't mention anything about the 2-player version to him. But he came back a little later with an updated rule sheet. I think there were a couple, questions I had about the rules that he had to clarify. And then suddenly he came out with this 2-player variant too. And so then we tried that, and it's with Luigi, and you can share how that works.
Well, basically, Luigi plays the card first, and so...
From the deck.
From the deck.
The top of the deck.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, whoever won last trick, or if, Luigi won the trick, then...
It switches
back and forth. They go after that.
Yeah.
And so basically it gives a little more variety. Instead of like one of us choosing who wins every time, it's like, I don't know. Well, I guess someone still kind of chooses who wins, but there's another card in the mix. So it could be just Luigi,
Yeah, so the way Luigi works is, Luigi can win the trick if he's the second highest card among the 3 of our cards. And he will want to go automatically to the highest spot he can possibly go. Either he's going to go to the highest empty spot or to the highest spot that he can bump somebody else down. And he doesn't collect points or anything, but he kind of provides a little more framework for 2 players to work around as they're trying to strategize and win tricks, or to keep Camille from maybe getting onto the hierarchy with a pretty good card. I may try to play a different card to give the win to Luigi instead. And so yeah, it's very cool 2-player change. How I think it's just cool how you went from like.
Yeah, I hated 2-player. I'm like, I don't ever want to play this game 2-player. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I this is my favorite way to play the game. So.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Reiner, well done there. So yeah, we really like this game. It's one that you play, and it's suggested by Reiner that you play 3 games in a row. It's very quick. Usually they're like 10-minute games roughly, or you can even go a little bit faster. So we estimate it's about a 10 to 30-minute game if you do the 3 rounds or not. And so, yeah, this is a game we're really excited about because it's not too it's very, very simple. All 3 games that we're publishing in this Kickstarter, and classic Reiner Knizia, he has very simple rules, but this one appealed to me because it feels so unsolvable and like unique in the board game, the card game genre, because usually it feels very straightforward what you play, and that seems like how Puma Fiosi plays at the beginning. It's like you only have 3 cards in your hand at a time, and so you would think it'd be very obvious what you should play, but then suddenly you play it a few times and realize, oh, maybe this is one I should start saving, or maybe I should let this person win instead of this person, or maybe I should place this in a different spot in the hierarchy than I've been doing up to this point. And there's these subtle little clever layers to this onion that have been really fun to peel back as we've played it over and over and over at a wide range of player counts, and enjoyed most at 2 players. So along those lines, we wanted to share for any who are interested in Puma Fiosi, we have just been getting in this week, actually, concept art from our illustrator, Uinta Alcyon, that's Paul Williams, for Puma Fiosi. Like I said, this is a Puma Mafia themed game. We originally from Reiner, this was just strictly a Mafia themed game, but knowing Paul and his strengths and abilities, he's very good with anthropomorphic stuff. He loves to do like hiking bears. I even have t-shirts. I worked at a screen printing place with him. That's how I first met him. T-shirts that he designed of like a bear with a hiking backpack and super cool stuff. And so I knew if we combined Mafia theme with pumas or like mountain lions, cougars, predator cats, that kind of thing, that Paul would just kill it. And he sent us the top hierarchy card, the number 10. That's the big boss. Think of like the Godfather, to give you some context there. And this thing just blew my mind.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
So for those of you who are interested, we encourage you to go to bitewinggames.com and subscribe to our monthly newsletter. We promise we don't spam you. We give you updates on like the latest podcast episodes, blog posts, and videos that we're doing, but we also give you first look updates on the development of these games. And so we're planning to share some of this mind-blowing concept art of Puma Fiosi in this very next update. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in a refreshing take on trick-taking and push your luck from the good Dr. Reiner Knizia, and the combination of his clever design with Paul's delicious artwork, then I think you're really going to like what you see in this upcoming email. So we're going to send that out the first Monday of June. So you have a little bit of time to sign up for the newsletter to be the first to see that. And we really appreciate those of you who have subscribed to our newsletter and are following along, because this is how ultimately the direction we want to go in Bitewing Games is to continue to share games that we love to play, as we've done here, but also create and add to the industry and provide refreshing perspectives and refreshing productions from some of the best designers in the world. And so we're very excited with how Puma Fiosi is shaping up. Anything you'd like to add, Camille?
It's pretty cool, guys.
Awesome. There you have it from from my significant other. And obviously neither of us are biased in this thing. No, we're big fans. We handpicked Reiner Knizia and Paul Williams to hopefully make some of the coolest and most enjoyable little simple card games for anyone's collection. And Yeah, that's all we have for this time. Camille, thank you for joining. This was fantastic.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't bore you too much.
No, your perspective and opinions are always refreshing, and it's a pleasure to have you on here. It's a pleasure to play all these awesome 2-player friendly games that we have, and we hope you guys learned and found something new that to strike your interest, that you can play with a significant other, with a friend, with a family member, with a stranger. It doesn't matter. These are excellent 2-player games, and we are all about strengthening those bonds between individuals, between significant others, and we feel that gaming has done that for us, provided us a way to spend time together and have a lot of fun, and sometimes get real salty. So that's all we have for today. My name is Nick Murray, and this is the By Wing Games podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.